My name is Mia. I am 28 years old, and I work as a nurse in a small clinic. My story is one filled with sadness, hope, and the deep love I have for my younger brother, Sam. When I was only 7 years old, our mother passed away. She was our world, our everything. Sam was just 4 years old then, too young to understand that our mother was never coming back. I remember standing by her hospital bed, holding her hand, with tears in my eyes, whispering, "I will take care of Sam. I promise, Mom." After she was gone, everything changed. My father tried his best, but the pain of losing our mother was too much for him. He became sick, and it was like a dark cloud had fallen over our home. At such a young age, I found myself trying to take care of my father and my brother. I wasn't ready for it, but I had no choice. I would skip school to stay home with them. I cooked, cleaned, and did whatever I could, but I was only a child myself. One night, my father's sickness got worse. I remember him coughing, struggling to breathe, and I was so scared. I didn't know what to do. I called for help, but it was too late. He passed away in our small house, leaving Sam and me all alone. Our uncle, my father's brother, came to take us in. Uncle John and Aunt Sarah were kind, but they had their own family. They had a son, Jack, who was the same age as Sam. While they took us into their home, it didn't feel like a real family. They gave us food, a place to stay, but that was all. They loved Jack so much, but Sam and I always felt like we were in the way. Aunt Sarah would always cook Sam and me smaller portions of food, saving the best for Jack. When it was time for school, Jack got new clothes, and Sam had to wear my old, worn-out clothes. I could feel the difference every day, in every small thing they did. They took care of us, but only because they had to, not because they really wanted to. As Sam and I grew up, I became like a mother to him. I made sure he ate, did his homework, and stayed safe. I felt responsible for him, and I didn't mind. He was my little brother, and I loved him more than anything in the world. Years passed, and when Sam turned 18, our uncle decided it was time for him and Jack to go to the city to study. They would be going to university in Tokyo, a place far from where we lived. Sam was so excited. He'd always dreamed of becoming an architect, and this was his big chance. But I was terrified. How could I let him go? I had spent my whole life protecting him, taking care of him. I didn't know how to be without him. On the day they left, I hugged Sam tightly and said, "Promise me you'll call every day. Let me know you're okay." He smiled and nodded, telling me not to worry, but I couldn't help it. As the bus took him away, I felt a huge emptiness inside me. At first, Sam kept his promise. He called me every night, telling me about his classes, his new friends, and life in the big city. I could hear the happiness in his voice, and it made me smile. But as time went on, the calls became less frequent. Sometimes, I would sit by the phone for hours, waiting for it to ring, but it stayed silent. Then, one day, everything changed. I received a call from an unknown number. It wasn't Sam. It was the police. They told me that Sam and Jack had been arrested. I couldn't believe it. My heart stopped. What had my sweet, innocent brother done to end up in jail? When my uncle and aunt found out about the arrest, they quickly called a lawyer. The lawyer said they could only manage to get one of them released. After discussing it, my uncle and aunt decided to choose Jack, believing he could help get Sam out later. But I couldn't believe them. So I rushed to Tokyo as fast as I could. When I arrived at the police station, they told me that Sam and Jack had been in a fight at a nightclub. Someone had been hurt, badly, and they were being blamed. My heart was racing. This wasn't like Sam. He would never hurt anyone. The police refused to let me see Sam at first. I was desperate, begging them, crying, but they wouldn't let me. They said he would have to stay in prison until his trial. I felt helpless, lost, like I'd failed him. I had promised our mother I would always protect him, and now he was locked up, far from me. The days were long and painful. I visited the police station every single day, pleading with them to let me see Sam. Finally, after many days, they allowed me to visit him. When I saw him, my heart broke. He looked so tired, his face pale, his eyes filled with fear. I ran to him and hugged him tightly. "I didn't do it, Mia," he whispered to me, tears in his eyes. "I swear, I didn't do anything." I believed him. Sam wasn't violent. He wasn't a bad person. But the police had witnesses. People who said they saw Sam at the scene of the fight. It didn't matter how good he was, or how much I believed in him. The evidence was against him, and it seemed like no one cared about the truth. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. Every moment, I was thinking about Sam, trapped in that cold, dark cell. I tried to get a lawyer, to find someone who could help, but we didn't have money. I felt like I was losing the battle, like there was no way out, but I couldn't give up. I had taken care of Sam since we were children. I had protected him all our lives, and I wasn't going to stop now. I would do whatever it took to save him, no matter the cost. Every time I went to visit Sam in that cold, dim room, it felt like a piece of my soul was being torn apart. The guards let him out, and one day, when I saw him, my heart ached in a way I can't explain. His hair had been shaved off, making him look so different, so fragile. The Sam I knew, the brother I had protected all my life, was disappearing in front of me. He was always smiling, always full of life, but now he looked broken. The sight of him in that prison uniform, with his head shaved, made me burst into tears. "I'll protect you, Sam," I whispered, my voice shaking as we both cried. "I promise you, I will get you out of here." Sam's eyes filled with tears as he nodded, but I could see the doubt in them. He didn't believe in himself anymore. He had always been so strong, but prison had stolen that from him. We clung to each other, tears streaming down our faces, both of us crying like we hadn't cried since we were children. "I can't take it anymore, Mia," he whispered one day, his voice barely audible. "I feel like I'm losing myself in here." It was in that moment that I knew I had to be stronger than ever. I couldn't let him lose hope. Sam was more than just my brother. He was my entire reason for living. I had taken care of him since we were kids, and now, even though he was an adult, I still felt like he was my child. When I left the prison that day, I made a vow to myself. I would do whatever it took to get Sam out of there. I didn't care how many hours I had to work, how much money I had to make, or how much I had to sacrifice. I would save him. I started working double shifts at the clinic, barely sleeping, barely eating. Every penny I earned went toward legal fees. I didn't care about myself anymore. I only cared about Sam. My hands ached from all the work. My eyes were always tired, but I pushed through. Every night, I would lie awake in bed, thinking of Sam in that cell, with his head shaved, surrounded by criminals. It kept me going, kept me fighting. But it wasn't just the money. I knew Sam needed me emotionally. So Every chance I got, I would go visit him. Even though I was exhausted from work, I would sit on the cold bench, waiting for them to bring him out. And every time I saw him, it was the same. We would both cry, holding each other through the glass, wishing things could go back to how they were. I would tell him over and over again, "I won't let you stay here, Sam. I'll protect you. I'll save you." But every visit also hurt me. I could see the life slowly draining from Sam. His spirit was fading, and it terrified me. He started to talk less, and there were days when he wouldn't even meet my eyes. I knew prison was changing him, and it scared me more than anything. I would see the new bruises on his arms, the cuts on his hands, and I didn't even have to ask what happened. I could see it. He was suffering. One day, when I went to see him, he couldn't hold back his tears. "Mia, I can't do this anymore," he said, his voice shaking with fear. "They're treating me like I'm some kind of criminal. They cut my hair. They call me names. I'm scared all the time." I reached out, my hands trembling, and pressed them against the glass. "I know, Sam. I know it's hard. But I'm here, okay? I'm always here for you. We'll get through this, I promise." After that visit, I worked even harder. I took on extra jobs, babysitting, cleaning houses, anything that would bring in more money. I needed to get him out. It was all I thought about. I didn't care about myself anymore. I just wanted Sam to be free. My body was exhausted, but my mind was focused. I couldn't let my little brother suffer like this. As the days passed, I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. I started selling everything I had, my jewelry, my clothes, anything that could give me just a little more money. I had to pay for a better lawyer. I had to save him. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I came home and collapsed on the couch, tears pouring down my face. I was tired, beyond tired, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't let myself rest. The only thing that kept me going was the image of Sam smiling again, free from that prison. Then, one night, during a visit, Sam said something that broke me completely. He looked up at me, his eyes full of pain, and said, "Mia, maybe it's better if I just stay here. I'm not the same person anymore. Maybe I deserve this." "No, Sam, don't say that," I cried, my heart breaking. "You don't deserve this. You're innocent. You've always been a good person, and you will get out of here. I'll make sure of it." But I knew, deep down, that I was running out of time. The longer he stayed in that place, the harder it would be to bring him back to who he was. I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't lose him, not after everything we had been through. The weight of responsibility was crushing me, but I couldn't give up. Sam needed me, just like he always had. I had been his protector since we were kids, and I wasn't going to stop now. I was exhausted. My body, my mind, everything felt like it was falling apart. But I kept going. I had to. I couldn't let Sam stay there. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him in that cold cell, alone and scared. I kept telling myself, I will save him. I promised him I would. And so, I kept fighting. One day, after weeks of pushing, the lawyer called me. "Mia," he said, his voice calm but serious, "we've done it. Sam is getting out." For a moment, I couldn't speak. My heart raced, and my hands started shaking. I couldn't believe it. "Are you serious?" I whispered, tears already forming in my eyes. "Yes," he said. "He'll be released tomorrow." I dropped the phone and fell to my knees, crying harder than I ever had before. Relief, happiness, An overwhelming love for my brother washed over me. Finally, I thought. Finally, Sam is coming home. The next day, I stood outside the prison gates, my heart pounding in my chest. I could barely breathe as I waited. Every second felt like an eternity. I kept thinking about everything we had been through, the loss of our parents, the way I raised him, the nights I stayed awake worrying about him. And now, finally, he was coming back to me. Then, the doors opened, and there he was. Sam, my little brother. His face was thinner, his eyes tired, but he was free. I couldn't move at first. I just stood there, staring at him, trying to hold back the flood of emotions inside me. But the moment our eyes met, I ran to him. He dropped his bag and opened his arms, and we collided in the biggest hug. I wrapped my arms around him as tightly as I could, never wanting to let go. We were both crying, shaking with the force of it, holding on to each other like our lives depended on it. "I'm so sorry, Mia," he sobbed into my shoulder. "I'm sorry for everything." "Shh," I whispered, my voice breaking. Don't apologize. You're here now. That's all that matters. You're free, Sam. You're free." We stood there for what felt like hours, crying, holding each other. All the pain, all the fear, everything we had gone through, it all poured out in that moment. I kept whispering, "I love you, Sam. I love you so much." And he kept saying, "Thank you, Mia. Thank you for never giving up on me." I pulled back slightly to look at him, wiping the tears from his face. "I told you," I said, smiling through my tears. "I promised I'd protect you. I promised I'd get you out. And I did." He smiled at me, and for the first time in months, I saw the Sam I knew. The boy who had always been so full of life, so strong. He was coming back to me. We walked out of the prison together, hand in hand, and it felt like the weight of the world had been lifted off my shoulders. The sun was shining, and for the first time in so long, I felt like we could finally breathe. As we drove back home, I looked over at him, sitting beside me, and I realized something. No matter how hard things had been, no matter how much we had lost, we still had each other. And that was enough. When we got home, I made his favorite meal, and we sat together, just the two of us. It felt like a fresh start, like everything was going to be okay now. Later that night, as we sat on the couch, Sam leaned his head on my shoulder. "Mia," he said softly, "you saved my life. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "You don't have to," I whispered, kissing the top of his head. "You're my brother, Sam. I'll always be there for you, no matter what." And as I held him close, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. We had been through so much, but we had made it through, together. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Sam laughing in the kitchen. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. For the first time in so long, my heart felt full. I had my brother back, and that was all I ever needed. As I sat there, watching him smile, I realized that this was the moment I had been waiting for. We had been through hell, but we had come out stronger. Our bond, our love, was unbreakable. And no matter what the future held, I knew we would face it together. In that moment, everything felt right. I had kept my promise. Sam was free, and we were finally, truly